and welcome to Thrift Shop Biography. This is the one about Michael Hutchence. Thank you for listening. Hello, Cleo.
Hello, Richard.
How are you?
All right, you all right?
I'm all right, thanks. So tell me about the book you've been reading this week.
Well, it's Michael Hutchence by Tina Hutchence, his sister. Oh, no, what's it called? I always forget what they're called. What's it called? My Brother, Lost Boy.
My Brother, the Lost Boy of InXS, I
I
think.
can't remember.
Why do we start these podcasts? We never have the book next to us.
I know, I never do. I can't even see it in the room.
We just rely on our terrible memories.
Yeah, I know.
So, are you a Michael Hutchence or stroke InXS fan?
Yes, I loved InXS. Loved the album Kick. That's the only one I owned, though. And all the other singles I know, but never the albums. How about you?
Yeah, same. In fact, I kind of came to them, you know, when Need You Tonight had that massive hit, which is where they first kind of...
Oh, it's an amazing song.
Do you know what? I didn't like it.
Really?
Yeah, it was just a bit too funky for me.
Oh, it's just right funky for me.
Yeah, you see, I totally get why you like them. He's right up your street, isn't he?
Yeah. After reading this book, I regret not having seen them live. I now realise they would have been brilliant to see live.
Oh, I know. I'm so tempted to go on and watch that Live Baby live concert that was recorded at Wembley because it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But that live concert got criticised because people thought they were miming a lot of the time.
Miming because they were so tight. Because they've been touring forever.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, I never knew that.
So because of that, that makes me think, wow, that must be amazing. And actually, I think, you know, a lot of bands like, you know, stadium rockers like Queen and Led Zeppelin and U2, even Coldplay. InXS are never really spoken about in the same breath as those bands, as massive stadium rockers. But
are they?
It seems like they really are.
Yeah, it does.
So yeah, I'd like to go and check that out.
Yeah, legends.
Yeah, I've really loved this book because obviously it's his sister and she loves him. She's an older sister, right? She's like 12 years older than him. But I really love the version of Michael that she gives us. And obviously she just adores him. And actually reading a book about him through his sister's lens, as it were, I really adored him myself.
Yeah, I know. And it's actually very interesting to read about the Australian music scene, which I didn't know anything about.
Yeah.
All these bands they mention, it's pretty much the only one I've heard of. There's two others. Midnight Oil,
Yeah.
Men at Work, InXS, Kylie.
Yeah, they don't break out. Well, actually, Kylie broke out of Australia because of Neighbours, right? And, you know, of course, in the 80s when we grew up, Australian culture really crossed over, I think, because of the soap operas.
It really did.
I mean, you still watch Neighbours to this day, right?
I still watch Neighbours, and I stand by that loud and proud because it's absolutely brilliant, right? It's just amazingly great drama and really fun. Lately, I've been watching a lot of back episodes and realised there's really great music in Neighbours. So I started to Shazam it, you know.
Yeah.
Every single song came on, I had a look to see who it was, and every single one is an Australian band.
Really?
So they actually are massive music showcases. It's a great platform for Australia, Neighbours. So stop joking about Neighbours. and everybody watch it. That's what I would say.
I think it's from that, you know, growing up in the 80s and having such an Australian influence on our, like, pop culture, that's really carried through my life. And I think that Australia is often ignored when people talk about worldwide culture. When they talk about the best 50 TV shows worldwide, it's always American with a bit of English thrown in. Australian shows never, ever get featured. And some Australian films and drama over the last 40 years has been amazing.
Yeah, they obviously have to fight so much harder to get heard by the rest of the world.
Yeah.
But then, I also reading this, it said that there was only 15 million people in Australia in the 80s. That's such a small amount of people.
I know that when Neighbours hit big in Britain, Madge Bishop came over and they interviewed her. She said more people watch Neighbours in Britain than the entire population of Australia.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So it is a small continent, bloody miles and miles away.
Yes.
So when a band like InXS go global, it's absolutely epic for Australia, isn't it?
And for the rest of us, because we get to hear it all.
Yes.
And I love this book as much about his personal life. And I forgot, actually, that he went out with Kylie. I forgot that he went out with Helena Christensen. So, also, at the same time, this is a real showbiz book as well. Like, if you love celebrities.
It is, actually, yeah. You do. You turn to that chapter and you go, and now he goes out with Kylie. And you go, oh, yes, it's Kylie time.
It's always Kylie time in my house.
Oh, yes.
So, shall we just crack on with it, Cobber?
All right, Bruce, let's get on with it.
Michael Hutchence.
Michael Kelland John Hutchence. Yeah, he's got Kel as a middle name. Kath and Kim.
Kath and Kim?
Michael's dad is called Kel.
Yes.
And all I can think of is Kel from Kath and Kim. Yeah. And that's who I'm picturing. Did you as well?
Yeah, 100%. It's such an Australian name.
I've
Kel.
never heard the name Kel anywhere else.
Yeah, totally.
Yes.
And when I kept reading about his dad, Kel, in my head, I had Kel from Kath and
Yeah,
Kim.
you can imagine him in his underpants.
Yeah. It's quite an odd juxtaposition to think of Kel being Michael Hutchence's
Kel
dad.
raised Michael Hutchence, yeah.
So this book is written by Tina Hutchence, his sister, but she has a different dad. So she's 12 years older than Michael.
Yeah, she was born in 1948.
Yep, and then after Michael, there came a little brother, Rhett, but it's essentially the three of them, but there's a big gap between Tina and Michael.
There is. So Tina's dad left her mum, Patricia Kennedy, when Tina was about 2. And she was working in nightclubs, and then she was an usherette, and then she was a model. So she was on that side of things as a woman trying to make it. When she meets Kel Hutchence in Melbourne, by that time she was about 26. Kel was about 34, so, she'd had quite a long time as a single mother.
She was quite switched on.
Yeah, she really was.
Patricia, when she was 23, she actually opened a modelling academy. She was very resourceful, and she, being a young single mother, she was very switched on and she got stuff done. Yeah, and then she met Kel.
Yeah.
And her and Kel got together quite quickly, and then Michael was conceived quickly as well.
Yeah, and then they were always moving because this Kel had some always crazy business ideas and left this job and tried that job, and they were always moving and moving schools. They were in Brisbane, then they were in the suburb of Sydney, which is where Michael was born.
Yeah, they moved quite a bit around Australia, and they're quite substantial moves, actually, because Australia is like a big country, isn't it?
Yeah, it's massive.
And we're still in the 1960s, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, Michael was born in 1960.
60.
Yeah. Oh, 1964. Kel got a job for a British import-export company, which was supplying posh alcohol, basically, to fancy hotels. Yeah, that seemed like a good job. And they moved to the Hong Kong Hilton into a suite. Kel was in a suite. He got in the suite next door. They were there for ages.
Yes.
That's a nice life.
So Michael's younger years, most of them, like before he's 10, are actually spent in Hong Kong. And he goes to an English language school there, which of course is basically full of middle-class kids.
It's really Britain, because Britain run Hong Kong at that point.
Yeah, right.
He was at King George V school. It's completely British. And when he went there, they all mocked his Australian accent, and he had to anglicise his accent, because when you hear him, he doesn't sound that Australian. So his really formative years were in this British international school in Hong Kong.
What I thought was fun is that when he's still a kid, like 10 years old, he actually records.
Yeah.
Goes into a recording studio and records a Christmas carol.
Yeah.
And they don't quite know what it's for. Actually, what it is this little plastic disc that you put into a toy Santa.
Yeah, it's in the toy shop.
That's amazing. That's Michael Hutchence's first recording, is a Christmas carol inside a toy Santa.
Yeah.
That's never come up before in all of our rock star biographies. That's quite unique.
It is, isn't it? I was reading that thinking there must be super fans who are spending their whole life trying to find these Santas.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be pretty hard.
So he spent a few years in Hong Kong, and then they came back to Sydney.
And then, of course, he turns up to his new school in his British uniform with his British accent, and he gets so bullied. So, yeah, I mean, he had one bloke stick up for him, this bloke called Andrew Farris. The two of them became, after a while, really good friends, and that's the main other songwriter. Him and Andrew Farris were the main songwriters behind all the greatest In Excess songs. I love it when they meet at school.
I know, it's like George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley, isn't it?
Yeah, it is like that. It actually really is.
Yeah.
Except Andrew Farris probably had more of a personality.
Yes, but George Michael and Michael Hutchence are both dead now.
Blimey, that's sobering.
So, little Michael Hutchence and Andrew Farriss. Andrew Farriss has a brother, Tim. They start doing music together. And as they grow into older teenagers, they have bands with a couple of other friends. You know, the 6 guys that started when they were teenagers were the same 6 guys in excess throughout the whole career. That's amazing.
I know, they literally never even swapped one out.
Yeah.
The whole lineup from those school days, remains the same.
I had to double check this because what's unusual as well is that In Excess have 6 people in, which is actually quite unusual for a band. It's usually 4, sometimes 5. You rarely get 6.
Yeah, it's a lot, isn't it? But yeah, this kid who was on drums, he was only 16 and he had to stay in Perth to finish his last year of high school. So the entire bunch of them, all 5 of them, moved across the country to Perth so they could all be together for that kid to finish his high school. He must have been a great drummer.
Yeah, he's another Farriss brother, wasn't he?
I think so.
So these 6 teenagers are now in Perth and they essentially make this little gritty indie band. It's how they support themselves, just by doing gigs everywhere, basically. You know, they have local success. They're playing friends' parties and bars and stuff, and they are making a little bit of money. I think Michael actually said he was making $100 a week. So they're making it work, these 6 young teenagers.
Yeah, they've got residencies at clubs and stuff. They were called the Vegetables at this point.
Yeah, they were called Dr. Dolphin.
And then they were like, well, but at that time it was like the B-52s and U2 and all those sort of things. So they sort of thought, what looks good on a poster is when it's really short and bold.
Yeah, it was the sound and lighting guy with Midnight Oil who actually suggested the name In Excess. And it is a really good name, actually, for a band.
It's really cool.
And also they said the shorter the name is, the bigger it can be on a poster. I never thought of that before. So if there's a wall of gig posters, if you're called In Excess, that's the biggest name on that whole wall.
It's genius. So, yeah, they were lads, right? And they were very much definitely stoned all the time. That was their thing, was definitely weed and probably alcohol. They were having a great time and there was no harm done at that point. And then it says that they were supporting bands like Midnight Oil and Cold Chisel and Ice House. Cold Chisel comes up a lot. Bands that I feel like, oh, that's so sad that I'd never heard of them, but they are absolute legends in Australia, but they never got out of Australia. So we've never heard them. We've missed them. It seems quite sad, doesn't it? That we've missed all this Australian music. The only access to it is Neighbours, I'm telling you.
It must be so frustrating for an Australian band because you are stuck right out there. And I think it involves such a lining up of different factors to actually get you breaking through to the rest of the Western world. And actually, I think talent, sound and quality of songs has actually got very little to do with it.
Yes.
It's to do with opportunity, your management, record labels, timing.
Do
you know
I've
what
no
I mean?
doubt.
So yeah, there is. I'm sure there's a whole history of fantastic. Well, it's not undiscovered music because Australia are listening to it. But it would be a shame if the only international exposure your band ever got was being played in the background on a scene on Neighbours.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But as long as you sell in Australia, that's something, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah.
But their dream, they really, really wanted it. They needed to go international. And they got signed by the ex-manager of AC/DC to this indie label called Deluxe.
Who are an Australian institution.
AC/DC are?
Yeah. AC/DC, do you think they're the biggest Australian band ever?
Oh my God, I didn't know they were Australian.
Really? Akadaka.
Are they Australian?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I didn't know. I never even knew what they were. I didn't know who they were from.
This guy, the manager of AC/DC, signed In Excess, this little gritty 6 teenager band, to a 5-album deal.
Yeah, amazing.
So you know what? I bet they were amazing. If they spent like a year and a half in Perth just basically playing every night and having...
Yeah, they honed their act, didn't they?
I bet they were really good at this point, these kids.
Yeah, and plus they were working on their own material. They started as sort of covers band, it says. They kept replacing the covers with their new stuff, so they were writing loads.
Yeah.
Seriously creative.
So they recorded their first single, Simple Simon.
Yeah, then they knocked out albums pretty fast, didn't they? I mean,
oh my God, when they got going, yeah, I was amazed at how many albums they actually did.
Yeah, pretty much one a year.
Because Simple Simon was where it didn't chart or anything, but it was very well received. Deluxe Records gave in excess 10,000 Australian dollars to record an album.
Called In Excess.
And that came out in October 1980.
And in 1981, they did 300 shows.
Yeah.
4 different tours. I'm not brilliant at maths, but that's nearly one a day.
You don't have to be brilliant at maths to realise that.
Yeah, that's nuts, isn't it?
Yeah.
They'll be loving it.
But, you know, they're young, they're full of energy,
Yeah.
they're excited to be a working band. And, of course, you know, doing 300 shows in a year, you're getting, like we said at the beginning, by the time they get to do Live Baby Live in Wembley Arena, they are the tightest band on earth.
Yeah, totally. Then they get to do an overseas tour in 1982. They go to New Zealand supporting Cold Chisel. Mm-hmm. But their main singer-songwriter of Cold Chisel is Don Walker, and he's producing this soundtrack for a film called Freedom. And he gets Michael Hutchence to do the vocals on a song for that soundtrack called Speed Kills. And it's apparently amazing. And that was his first solo, thing away from...
Yeah, I didn't realise that he was doing solo stuff already.
No, me neither.
So he's already being recognised within the industry.
Yeah.
People say, oh, hey, that kid who fronts that band, let's get him to do a solo track on this film soundtrack.
Yeah.
So people are recognising his talent as a frontman already.
Yeah, he has got a gorgeous voice.
Yeah, he's got a gorgeous face. He's just like charisma personified, isn't he?
Oh, yeah, he is. And then they're touring, they're going to America, doing huge festivals, and they're touring USA, supporting Adaman and the Kinks and the Stray Cats.
Yeah, fantastic.
How great.
Yes.
But it'd be a great night, any one of those nights, that's a fact.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, then, okay, look, 1984, Band Aid. Did you know that Australia had their own Live Aid concert?
No, I didn't. What part of the Live Aid concert?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I had no idea.
Nor did I, and I feel absolutely cheated. Plus, the bloke, Bill Gordon, he'd got the idea from Band Aid to put this on. He flew to London to pitch to Bob Geldof and Midge Ure to do a massive concert with a satellite link up to Australia. And it then happened with the live satellite link up to America and Australia, she's writing. So in all the history of Bob Geldof and Live Aid, it never mentions that it isn't Bob's idea.
Never mentioned.
That's outrageous to me. And then, not only that, we then blank out of our history that Australia was involved at all. Because I didn't even know they had a concert.
Live Aid is still talked about frequently, like retrospectively.
Yep.
And in the 35 years since it happened, I've never once heard that there was an Australian arm of it.
Nor have I. And it was Australia's idea and he pitched it. Written out of history. That's quite outrageous.
Yeah, I find it very weird why it just wasn't part of it from the beginning, why Australia just wasn't part of it. It's weird how it's all been completely airbrushed out.
Well, it has to us, but maybe if that was watched by the whole world, maybe the whole world saw the Australian part. And just we didn't.
No, why would it just be us that don't know about it?
I don't know.
I was totally mystified when I was reading this, because it's new information to me, and I know everything about 1980s pop culture, everything.
Yeah. They've literally just done this musical in London.
Oh, yeah.
Called One
Day.
One More Day. Only One Day or something like that. And I went to see it. Bob Geldof was there, and it's all the praises on him, and he's the hero of the whole thing. And it turns out it wasn't even his idea. It's cheeky. Plus, they had Midge Ure over there hosting their one. So that's how connected it was. And we don't even know. Anyway, moving on, but that's one tick against Bob of quite a few coming up.
Anyway, so In Excess played the Australian arm of Live Aid, did they?
They did, actually. Yes, they did. As did Men at Work and some other bands I've never heard of, outrageously, like Little River Band.
What we're missing at the moment, by this point, because In Excess have broken out and have been touring America, actually in Australia, they're the biggest band now.
They've
really become successful. And their latest album, The Swing, which is their 4th album, is topped the Australian album charts for 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So within Australia, they are the biggest band now.
Absolutely. They dominate the awards, any awards going.
Yeah.
Yeah, then they've got the 5th album straight out. Listen Like Thieves.
Yeah, it's amazing how they keep knocking these albums out.
And they're really strong albums.
Yeah.
They do a command performance for Charles and Di. Di, of course, loves him. You knew she would.
Yeah.
She'd have had a massive crush on him. Poor Charles. Can't compete with that.
So, not only are they knocking all of these albums out, they're also touring extensively now across Europe and America, North America, and the UK. And then, like in 1986, they go on a UK TV show called The Tube, which is hosted by a lady called Paula Yates. And that's the first time she interviews Michael on screen.
I watched that this week. It's on YouTube. Outrageous flirting. I've only ever seen before the interview on the bed where their legs are wrapped around each other. And I always thought that was the beginning of everything. But it obviously started quite a bit before that.
I mean, she was quite flirtatious anyway, wasn't she?
Oh, she's so flirtatious. Oh, yeah, with anyone. But
she kind of upped it for Michael Hutchence.
She really did.
As I think anybody would, right?
Yeah, and he's loving it. And Bob Geldof sat on the stool behind them during the interview, completely there. It's outrageous.
So Paula Yates and Bob Geldof are married. They've been together for about 10 years at this point.
Yeah, and they've got a kid. Actually, they weren't married at that point. They had a 2-year-old kid and had yet to be married. But that's incidental. I would just like to add this. Around this time, they'd been advised to write off a load of tax. They should invest in films because you lose so much money in films and you don't have to pay it in tax. So what did they pick? Crocodile Dundee. That's actually brilliant. The second highest grossing film in 1985. That's what they picked as a tax write-off. Would have made them a mint by accident. That's great.
Yeah, that is very funny. Well, again, I imagine that Australian movies didn't really break out as much as Australian music did. And so they just think, okay, this weird little movie with Paul Hogan in, we'll back that. And then all of a sudden it explodes.
Yeah, you'd never believe it.
So their international fame is, of course, we've got MTV as well. When they're hitting them, they're touring America. You know, they're a good-looking band. It's not just Michael Hutchence, actually. They're all quite good-looking in excess.
No, they're all good-looking.
But he's obviously at the front and he's very charismatic.
Yeah.
So they're growing exponentially in the States, and the Listen Like Thieves album is really taking off, and they get their first top 10 hit in the mainstream American charts as well. This is like 1986. So they've really broken out of Australia. And also in 1986, they support Queen on their kind of Magic tour. So
how cool is that?
Yeah, they're really getting there.
Yeah, you can only imagine Michael Hutchence and Freddie. It says, you know, nights where they just sang all night together in the hotel and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to have seen them together.
And then they start recording the album, which becomes Kick.
Yeah.
Which is, okay, they've kind of broken through internationally at this point, but Kick is the album which is going to go on and properly consolidate them as a major force.
Oh, yes.
But after they've recorded it, the record company don't like it.
No.
The manager of the record company offers in excess $1 million to record it again.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to release it.
How can you listen to those songs? Honestly, those people.
Well, it's amazing what they did to get it noticed, because they said there was one executive in France who actually loved it. And then that gave their manager, he thought, okay, you know, we're not going crazy. This is a good record. And so then, even though In Excess had been touring with Queen and had been doing some pretty big shows by themselves, he went back around all of the American college circuit. And they started doing gigs at college, which got them onto college radio. Is a big thing in America that we just don't get over here.
Right.
If you get your records serviced to college radio, and that goes around all the colleges, all of a sudden you're tapping into like American teenage.
The huge market. Yeah.
And they went back and did this little tour around all the American campuses, which got their music onto the American radio stations. And it built up such a buzz that the record company then released Kick, the album. Yeah. That's amazing that they went back and started doing these smaller gigs when they'd already established themselves and had already been in the Billboard Top 10.
Yeah, they really, really worked for it, didn't they?
They did, but you know what? You, as an international band, you have to actually with America. I've heard this before. The reason so many of them don't crack America, because you do have to spend 2 years touring. And in fact, do you remember talking about Wham again? They didn't have the time to do it, which is why why they came up with the plan of Wham going to China.
That's right.
Because that would make the news, and then all of America know who Wham are. So they could leapfrog that 2 years of small gigs, and they went straight to the arenas and the stadiums.
Yeah.
But actually, NXS were already making it. They went back and they did this circuit. They worked really hard. But like you said, they did 300 gigs a year before in 1 year. So this is kind of like nothing to them. They're used to it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they deserve their success. They really worked hard for it, didn't they?
They really did, yeah. Can we just say as well, that album, it's got Devon Inside on it, Never Tear Us Apart, New Sensation,
classic.
Just some of the absolute best songs, and Kick, of course. It's just one after the other.
It spent 22 weeks in the American top 10. It is the biggest album.
Amazing.
That's, again, the record company just have no idea, do they?
Yeah, no, they're idiots. All right, Kylie comes along. It was a shocker because she was really sold as this totally innocent pin-up for school kids.
Yeah.
And then if she's going out with this rocker, she's not as innocent as she looks.
It transformed her, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It made her grow up in the public's eyes anyway. But yeah, because she'd got married to Jason Donovan's character in Neighbours, and it was watched by more people than watched a royal wedding or something crazy. But she actually said in interviews, doesn't say in this book, that she didn't know really what sex was until she met Michael Hutchence. He completely taught her this whole new world, which is really embarrassing for Jason Donovan. I've always felt for him for her saying that. She's told everyone that. Poor Jace. But yeah, obviously, he's a wild man.
Yeah.
And he's like twice her height.
Well, he's 10 foot tall.
He's 10 foot tall. But her sister says before that he always needed looking after by his girlfriends. And this one, because he was a bit older as well and taller, he really looked after Kylie. And she was just really getting hammered by the press. And that was a shock to him because he'd never been out with anyone famous before.
Yeah.
And suddenly there's these two. It's always when you combine two famous people that the press go mad, which means we must go mad for it because they're only supplying our demand.
And also it was a mismatch. It was a very interesting relationship because they were so different.
Yeah, the bad boy and the good girl.
It's like Grease.
Turns out Kylie's a little bit of a bad girl after all.
Yeah, well, her music started getting good after that, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
You know, she never could break out into America. I think she's only just pretty much doing it now.
Yeah.
And she's in her 50s.
They don't watch Neighbours in America, you see.
No, they don't.
Okay.
Now what happens?
Well, do you know what I thought was interesting? You know the INXS song Suicide Blonde? That actually came from Kylie Minogue because she was filming The Delinquents.
Yeah.
And they were on the phone one night and she says, I've had to dye my hair. And he said, what colour? And she said, Suicide Blonde. And then that becomes a really famous INXS song.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely brilliant. Oh, God, I can hear that playing in my head. I don't even need to Google it. I can hear it. It's so good. It's such a unique sound.
Yeah.
It's a bit like good jazz where they really focus on the space you leave. You know, the gaps. It's very much a music with gaps in. Do you know what I mean?
What was interesting to me was the way they write songs as a band. And they do basically get in the studio and just start jamming. And then Michael Hutchence comes in and he just scats.
Yeah.
And then through scatting, they then figure out what works, what melodies work here and there. And then they lay the lyrics on top. So actually, you've just said jazz. That's a very jazzy way of doing things.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I thought it was an unusual way of writing a song for a band. Usually one of them has already come up with the melody line and the lyrics and they play it acoustically and the rest of them come on and fill it out.
Yeah.
But this seems to happen much more organically.
It does. And although there's loads of rifts by now because they're just living separate lives, you know, there's a point where he's moved back to Hong Kong a bit for a tax break. And the others have got farms in Australia and stuff. Then he's going out with Kylie's jetting everywhere. Later on, he goes out with Helena Christensen and he's in the fashion world and stuff.
Well, it sounds like he's cheating on poor Kylie with Helena Christensen.
Oh, he definitely is. That was definitely an overlap.
Yeah.
Because Tina says that her mum and her mum's new husband come to New York and he's been phoning Helena a lot and they haven't met yet. So then they all go to see INXS at Madison Square Gardens and that's the first time Helena Christensen had seen INXS. And they all thought this woman was lovely and they all went out together and had a great time. And then, so they wrote a note and put it under the door of Michael's hotel room saying, "It's lovely to see you. Shall we all meet for lunch tomorrow? Bring Helena." And when they all went to lunch, Kylie was there and it was very frosty. So possibly she saw the note. And they never saw Kylie again. That's awkward.
Yeah, it's really awkward. Poor Kylie.
Tina really says, that Kylie has since said in interviews she was just really coming of age and it was the perfect relationship to see her into it. And they had so much fun. And she said, so did my brother. He had so much fun. And it's a really nice thing to say.
Yeah.
And Kylie has always just talked about how amazing he was.
Yeah.
She just loves him. She might have been pissed off for 5 minutes, but, she got over it.
You know what? Kylie's got so much class, and it was a transitional relationship for her. It kind of changed her life in a good way. Do you know what else? What's also nice about this book being written by his sister? There's a whole chapter of when him and Helena Christensen make a proper go of it, where they just spend Christmas together and both of their families come.
Yeah.
It was just a really nice celebrity chapter in the book where it's just really lovely stories of them all spending a Christmas together. Yeah, which really does give so much more colour to Michael Hutchence. He's
really
not
does.
Just a rock star. It really brought him alive that he's a really lovely, generous, accommodating man to his partner and his family and his partner's family.
Yeah, it's true.
So him and Helena have a really nice relationship, right? And obviously she's very busy being a supermodel.
Yes.
By the way, what I thought was really funny, I never heard this before, but when the boyfriends go to watch their supermodel girlfriends in the fashion shows, so there's Michael Hutchence. Who else? Johnny Depp is going out with a
Johnny
supermodel
Depp, Richard Gere and Cindy Crawford.
Richard Gere, and she says that they're called the handbags. Yeah. I never knew that. That's so funny. The supermodel boyfriends are called the handbags. That's so funny.
Yeah, because it's always girls being the wags, isn't it? So this time boys get a nickname. Yeah.
So him and Helena, they have this nice relationship where they meet up when they can, and they're quite often in France or Italy or something. And at one point they've been out and they're walking down this side street and there's an impatient taxi driver behind them. But they're on bicycles, aren't they?
Yeah, they're trying to mount their bikes or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he can't get past them.
Yeah, so the taxi driver kind of hits into them to get past.
No, he gets out of the taxi in anger and pushes Michael. Michael falls to the ground. He just lost his balance being pushed and it hit his head. And so the bloke goes back in his taxi and drives off.
And Michael's unconscious. He's fractured his head. But that actually turns out to be quite a significant moment in his life.
I'd say that's the beginning of, it is the beginning of doom.
Yeah, because she says that there's physical things that happen, like he completely loses his sense of smell and taste, which never really comes back.
And he's such a foodie as well. He loves cooking.
He's just a sensual person.
He's a sensual man. Yeah, exactly.
But she also says that the changes in his personality happened. People noticed that. He started becoming short-tempered and he had really bad mood swings. And he said that he even became physically violent. So that tells me that up until that moment, he hasn't been those things. He's actually quite mild-mannered. If she says he became physically violent, that kind of tells me that since he's been an adult, he hasn't really been.
Oh, definitely.
So this smack to the head actually is a life-changing moment, isn't it?
It's classic. It's proper brain damage symptoms, that is. And she's saying that even then, in the early 90s, people didn't understand as much about brain damage as they do now.
Yeah, right.
So it's crazy, isn't it? So they didn't really even give him the benefit of that doubt as to why he's behaving like that.
So running alongside all of this, they're doing their biggest worldwide tour yet, which runs for 10 months, 121 massive stadium shows around the world. Of course, Michael Hutchence is, even though In Excess of very much a band, is that thing of him being the charismatic frontman. All of the interviews, all of the promotion, he has to be there.
Yeah.
So they're constantly traveling. So he's also getting exhausted. It's at this time that amazing Live Baby Live concert is released. So they really are at the top of their game. They're an amazing live band and they're traveling the world, but it's exhausting. They're really on that treadmill of being one of the biggest bands in the world.
Yeah.
And he's dealing with a new head injury at this time,
Yeah. And so are we blaming brain damage for the fact that he left beautiful Helena Christensen and went out with madwoman Paula Yates?
Well, there has to be some explanation.
Yeah.
At this time, they're so burnt out from touring. And again, they've got another album coming out. They're just relentlessly knocking out albums in the 80s and the 90s. And Michael is talking to the manager one night, and he actually says that he doesn't want to tour the new album because they're so burnt out. And he says, I have to put the Michael Hutchence coat on and be Michael Hutchence. I want to be Michael Hutchence who just wakes up with his girlfriend in the morning and has breakfast. So he's kind of having had enough at this point, hasn't he?
Yeah, he needs a break. He's burned out. Yeah, they've been on the road his whole life.
Yeah, when they are recording the next album, Full Moon, Dirty Hearts, which is now 1992, like you say, the band are socially fractured at this point, because it's not just Michael Hutchence who's burnt out, it's the whole band. And they've all got money, so they all retreat to their farms and stuff. But when they come together to record the next album, they're actually staying in different apartments and hotel rooms. They're not even in the same place. But the manager says that he could hear in Michael's hotel room furniture being smashed. So he's really kind of losing the plot a bit, being by himself. And
Yeah.
Because he's such a family person, isn't he?
He is, yeah. And so that's the point he meets Paula. He's very vulnerable. And what would ground him is family. And Paula Yates has 3 gorgeous little daughters, Fifi, Peaches and Pixie, with Bob Geldof. They're already clearly, Tina thinks, having an affair whilst he's still with Helena.
Well, it sounds like Paula, sometimes backstage at gigs, Paula would turn up. So she's been around, hasn't she?
Yeah, they're definitely seeing each other on the sly. So she leaves Bob and takes the daughters, and then she orchestrated a meeting with him where she'd made sure the press were there, basically. Tina says it was a deliberate attempt to split Helena and Michael up. And so it hit the press, and that split up Helena, off she goes, and Paula's got what she wants. It's very manipulative the whole time, Paula Yates. Even getting pregnant, if you want to hold down a rock star like that you make sure your daughters love him, and she kept telling him how much her kids love him, and you make sure you get pregnant, and then he won't go. And it's amazing that hasn't happened to him before, to be honest. It happens to most of these rock stars, doesn't it?
You know, Paula Yates, it said in this book, from that first meeting when she interviewed him on the Tube, and she is, in a relationship and has children with Bob Geldof. She put a photograph of Michael Hutchence on the fridge.
Yeah, surrounded it with fairy lights.
Yeah, it said that Bob Geldof wrote an expletive across it. So she took it off and replaced it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I get that it's a bit of fun and stuff, but if you're married and have kids with somebody else, you can't put a photo of another man on your fridge.
Yeah. Well, you could if you weren't famous and there's no chance of ever meeting him and going off with him. But for them, there's every chance.
Right, yeah.
It's be like putting a photo of your neighbour up if you're just a normal person. Because you might have an affair with your neighbour.
Yes.
It's a realistic prospect.
Yeah, she's... What would be the best word to describe Paula Yates? I mean...
Damaged. I would say damaged. I learned a lot about her.
Yeah, I know. I'm fascinated by her.
Well, I learned a lot about her just reading this. I didn't know, or if I knew, I'd forgotten, because it was in the press a lot around the time of all of this. But her mum was a bluebell, one of those high-kicking dancers, and then an actress and a romance novelist. It was all showbiz. And her dad was this bloke, supposedly, this older TV presenter called Jess the Bishop Yates, who had a TV programme about, church and stuff, and he was bipolar and on laudanum and very erratic and completely nuts, obviously. And after Michael died and she did DNA testing, she found out that wasn't her real dad. Her real dad was the TV host of Opportunity Knocks, Huey Green, who was very famous in his day. And Paula Yates' mum doesn't have any knowledge of sleeping with him, but that could be because her husband, Jess, the bishop, used to regularly spike her drink and drug her. And that bloke, Huey, was his really good mate at the time. So that was probably a mate set up rape. If she's the child of all of that, no wonder she's messed up. And then her mum was out of work all the time, leaving her with this mentalist, drug-spiking father who's drugged up and erratic. Oh, my God. The mum says, total ignorance at the time. I should have taken her to a psychiatrist. She's a neglected kid, basically. Borderline personality disorder. it really paints her as a victim of a mad family and very, very messed up. So all the manipulative behaviour, the drugs, everything that happens from now on, I don't almost blame her. I blame her background.
Yeah, it's horrendous. Poor woman.
You know, she didn't stand a chance. She's so messed up.
You know, this book written by Michael's sister, every single girlfriend that he's had before, even the non-famous
They've been lovely.
Tina in this book, she talks about them in such lovely, affectionate terms. And minute she starts talking about Paula Yates, you think, okay, we're going down a different road with this relationship. But she does actually explain Paula's family history, which is really valuable in this story.
It is, yeah.
You know, Channel 4 did a documentary about Paula Yates last year.
Yeah.
And I watched it. And the thing about her is, I've always really liked her. And when you see her being interviewed, she's incredibly intelligent. She's so articulate. She's so witty and sharp. You cannot help but like her.
Yeah.
And I can see how anyone would be thoroughly charmed by this woman.
Oh, yeah. Very flattered if she focused her attention on you.
Yeah. So I totally get why Michael would fall for her, and I get how she easily ingratiated herself with Michael's family.
And then she could easily manipulate him because, he was very vulnerable at the time.
So it's kind of like, as a person looking in on Paula Yates, I can say I really like her, but I now know and imagine that actually knowing her personally is she's just a complete nightmare.
Yeah.
And very difficult and very manipulative and...
really messed up. She's a really damaged person.
Really messed up. And I think maybe not even knowing what her own goals are, what her own reasons are for the things she does. It just seems such a voyage of self-destruction. But at the same time, having multiple children who she so clearly loves. And I think she's trying to save herself by being this fantastic mother, which I'm sure at times she absolutely was. But the dark side of herself just kept creeping back in and ruining everything.
I agree. And then on top of that, you've got drugs. They were both on Prozac.
Yeah.
They were both taking Rohypnol. Because the sister says the baby just slept. No one ever heard it cry at night. They had to run hot and cold water on it to wake it up in the morning. Now, that's because your parents are on drugs and that's breastfed into you. That's definitely what that is.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought when I read that. It's kind of like, wow.
Yeah, that's really worrying. Those children, that's fearful. I'm fearful for them. Of course, one's gone now.
Well, poor little Peaches, totally repeated what her mum did, unfortunately. She's no longer here.
Heroin overdose, 25.
Oh, it's so sad.
It is terribly sad.
So
terribly sad.
But look, it is sad. But are we putting all the blame on Paula Yates? Because Michael's also not in a good place at this time either.
I'm putting it on her parents.
Oh, okay.
Or I'm putting it on the drugging rapist the Bishop Yates.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. But at this point, when they're meeting each other, Paula Yates and Michael Hutchence are both grown adults at this point. They are both reliant on drugs. And I think that they were both struggling at the time they met each other. And it was just that awful combination of two people who could, if they hadn't met each other or got together, probably could have saved themselves. But together, it just increased the self-destruction.
It's total destruction, yeah.
So him and Paula get together and they have their baby, Heavenly Hirani Tiger Lily, is that right?
Yes.
It's just that awful thing where he doesn't want to marry her. I kind of wondered whether he meant to get her pregnant, actually.
Yeah, I don't know.
The whole thing is so confusing because I think he was in a confusing place at this time.
Agreed.
He had the worldwide stardom and he wanted the family life. And with Paula, there became a readily made family. And also there's the difficult thing of him being Australian, but having to spend time in England with the children and Paula.
Oh, and the press again. As soon as they got together, the press were insane.
Yeah, but she's tipping them off, isn't
she? Well, she was feeding them stories because she needs to be the centre of a crisis. That's part of her disorder. But also, at that point, Bob Geldof was a national hero. They'd made him an honorary Sir, knighted him, because of all his work for charity. And he was a total hero. And along comes this rock god and steals away this man's, this legend's wife and kids, and he's visibly upset. So everyone turns against the homewrecker, Michael. So that's not fun for him at all. He was hounded, but he couldn't leave London because Bob wouldn't let her take the kids out of London.
Do you know, I've thought about that a lot because I kind of think, Bob Geldof was being so unreasonable. But actually, he would have known about the drug taking.
Yes.
And he, there's
Agreed.
At one point when Michael Hutchence is working and touring in Australia and it's at Christmas and obviously his whole family is there and he wants Paula and the girls to come over to Australia, and it was initially agreed, and then Bob Geldof went back on his decision. And then I thought about that why, and then you kind of think, well, they are his daughters, they're Bob Geldof's daughters, and he has to let them go to the other side of the world with a mother who he knows is on drugs.
Yeah.
And also, in the back of his mind, Bob Geldof is thinking, what if she doesn't bring them back? What if she starts a life with Michael Hutchence in Australia?
Yes.
So all that is going on. So I kind of don't think it's such a horrible decision on Bob Geldof's part.
I agree. And he's actually trying to bring them up properly just to be normal and to stay in school and to get work done and be normal people, not rock and roll kids.
Yeah.
It does make sense.
Do you know what as well? I kind of think that Bob Geldof and Michael Hutchence are quite grown up about it because at one point, Michael Hutchence lets Bob Geldof and his new girlfriend stay in his house in London for 6 months.
Yeah.
I just wonder how much Paula is actually instigating things and
agreed.
complicating things to get her own back on Bob Geldof. I think she's using Michael Hutchence, whereas in the real world, I think Michael Hutchence and Bob Geldof would probably be quite pragmatic about it.
They would have. Yeah, I think she's been very manipulative and she just wants the drama so that she gets more attention because also he's still seeing other people. She even name checks one girlfriend he's got.
Yeah.
So,
as well, I think one of the worst things to happen at that point is when they are in Australia and the nanny is at the house, in Paula's house, and the car alarm goes off outside and she can't find the key. And so she's rummaging through Paula's room trying to find a key to turn the car alarm off. And actually what she ends up finding is some Smarties tubes, and they're full of a brown substance, which they thought was probably opium or could have been heroin. So then, because the nanny is horrified at discovering these drugs, she tells Bob Geldof, who tell the police. Then, inexplicably, Paula's publicist phones up Piers Morgan with the story. And so while they're away, there's a front page news headline, drugs found in Paula's house in sweet wrappers, and she has young children in the house. So that really sows the seed of her being a complete, if anybody thought she was an unfit mother before, this is like the turning point of the national narrative being Bob Geldof is the saint father of these girls and Paula Yates being a thoroughly drugged up, unfit mother. I think there's more. I kind of thought, really, did the car alarm go off?
I don't know.
Did they find the drugs that way? I wondered if the nanny, who obviously the nanny would know that Paul was on drugs. I wonder if there was some kind of intervention that needed to be done.
Yeah, and she's trying to protect the kids. And rightly so, because around that time, those kids found their mum basically in a coma. She had an overdose and they thought she was dead. And they got her to the hospital and she revived. But their kids were 7 and 8 when they found their mother apparently dead. So it was messed up. And so that nanny probably was worried for the kids. So anyway, all this is massive stress on Michael. Huge. There's court cases, court appearances, press following him. It's just an absolute nightmare. And he just wants his life to go back to normal, like this. The lovely, oh my God, the lovely haven he had in France, which suddenly out of nowhere, Paula Yates decides to have painted all bright colours. And it was this 400-year-old farmhouse with 400-year-old timber beams. She paints the beams bright colours.
Oh my God, I know.
The whole sentence in this book says sacrilegious. It sounds horrendous. Plus then, her 3 kids desecrated the garden Michael absolutely loves.
Well, they're acting up.
Yeah, do you know what? That just says to you, those kids are not happy kids.
They just found their mother in a drug coma. They could trash a rose garden if they want to.
They trashed their rose garden. Every single head of every rose, the olive bushes were pulled out. They chopped branches off. They trashed the thing that Michael spent years working on with his gardener, right? Those kids are crying out for attention. Those kids are troubled.
Oh, the whole thing is such a shame because Michael just wanted a family,
Yes.
which he had with Paula and the girls. Paula obviously wants a family, but it's just so awful. It's like it's almost like they both wanted the same thing, but they were coming from such different places. And Paula was so destructive. And
she really was.
Michael had a tendency, after this head injury, to lash out and be self-destructive too. And somehow those two people coming together, they both seemingly wanted the same thing, but it was just the worst possible thing for both of them. And all Michael wanted to do, he said, didn't he? He just is fed up of putting the Michael Hutchence coat on. He just wants to stay at home and make breakfast for his girlfriend and be a kind of a family man. And he so desperately wanted that. And this whole, I don't want to demonize Paula because I like her, but she had a terrible upbringing. I think she just made some really bad choices, and I think she was the wrong person for Michael Hutchence. I wondered if he ever really meant to get her pregnant. He certainly didn't want to marry her, but I think he got stuck in a very difficult situation that ultimately did him in. I mean, we're running out of time, but we now sadly have to address the fact that magnificent, creative, sensitive, wonderful man, I mean, he took his own life.
He kills himself. He hangs himself on the door of his hotel. It's horrible. Then afterwards, Paulie Yates said it was some asphyxiation thing, it was some sex game. But actually, Tina's really investigated into it, and she just says, no, it was just probably a spur-of-the-moment misery because he was pretty tanked up on drugs and alcohol, and he'd had this phone call with Bob about the custody and the kids and he was touring, and he was sick of it all. Probably was just a bad 5 minutes that you just don't come back from.
Yeah, and of course, they said that since his head injury, he did have outbursts of temper and stuff. I think he was probably in a really bad space in his hotel room, and probably, he was under the influence of certain substances.
Yeah.
And then, he had a couple of phone calls and stuff, which depressed him even further. And I think, he probably just had a kind of an outburst, and then just in that horrible 2 minutes decided to end his life. And it's unspeakably sad.
It is.
Especially when you read how it all unfolded, like he was due to meet his friend in the morning and she actually went and knocked on the hotel room door, but she just kind of thought, he's probably sleeping in.
I know, she was just the other side of the door.
How that woman must live with that is just...
I know. Well, right at that time as well, they'd just got their 10th album out, Elegantly Wasted. I mean, that song alone is fantastic. So it's not like they were dropping off or the creative juices were running out. They weren't. They were really great still.
Yeah, they were touring, and you know what? They knew that Michael wasn't well on the tour, and actually some of the other members of the band said actually they didn't want to tour. They had their own problems as well. They were exhausted. They'd been drinking too much.
Yeah, they should have stopped.
We know the manager at that time, actually, who was on that tour, actually wrote a letter to Michael because she was concerned about his health. And the sister, Tina, is like, she could have shut that tour down. Nobody did. But you know what? We've read this before with people like Whitney Houston and Amy Winehouse. Too much money being made, and these people have to keep on this treadmill, and that's why they don't let them stop. And it ends in destruction.
Yeah, and then Michael kept saying he didn't want to let the band down.
Yeah.
But you are not letting the band down. You are, ultimately, if you bloody die.
Well, ultimately you are.
Yeah.
You're letting everyone down.
37 he was.
In his prime.
He had a hell of a lot of life. I'm so sorry all that crap happened to him at the end. I'm so sad that he had 2 good years of misery, but he's left us with some absolutely incredible tunes.
And then, of course, Paula Yates died as well, didn't she?
She died 3 years later of a heroin overdose.
God, drugs are just the worst.
And those kids were little. Yeah, and then Bob Geldof adopted Tiger Lily, so all 4 kids.
Well, you see, I remember at the time, and it's not really talked about in this book, but I know that Michael's mum and sister wanted custody of Tiger Lily. Eventually, it was kind of decided that she should stay with her sisters. So she did, and I think about that young girl, actually, who lost both of her parents like that.
Yeah.
And I hope she's okay.
Yeah, I did look her up, but she's released an album 2 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but isn't that amazing? Because she's about 8? So she was 26 when she released her first music.
Oh, I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, and it's to do with it. The title is to do with poor Tiger Lily, sad person or something, and it's apparently themed around losing her sister.
Oh, God, that poor girl. Oh, isn't it awful?
Yeah, I know. It's awful, Richard.
But do you know what? Let's think about his legacy. In Excess left some amazing music behind. Of course, he did a lot of solo work as well. Well, actually, Max Q wasn't solo. I thought it was at the time, but actually it's another band that he was working with.
No, it's just a side project,
Yeah.
Electronica. Yeah, I did watch that video. It was really good.
So there's actually more stuff that we can still dip into, because I never really got into Max
Yeah,
Q.
it's
So
true.
even though he's long gone, he's left behind a wealth
Yes, he has.
of work and music.
For us, we can take that and be comforted by it. For his family,
Yeah.
it's just pure crap.
Yeah, of course, it's awful.
But we've got the music, so yeah, there's so many albums I've missed.
Yeah, there's
no idea.
There's an excess of music to discover.
Hey!
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Thrift Shop Biography. We love making this podcast, and we're absolutely thrilled that so many of you are already listening. You could really help us out by leaving us a review somewhere, wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you could share us, tell your friends about us, or drop some links on social media. We have a Facebook page called Thrift Shop Biography, so make sure you come over there to hear about the episodes first and what else we're up to. Okay, see you next week. And if you're new here, there are loads more episodes now to go and listen in the back catalogue, so make sure you go and enjoy them. Okay, thank you very much.